It is I, the Wicked Witch of the Northwest Sinkhole of the Pizzaplex. I have returned from my long slumber to brew up some candy in the hottest cauldron this side of purgatory. And how do I keep my cauldron so toasty? Well, with the hottest takes I can find, of course. Stare deep into the red waters and let's see what we find. And don't worry, I know my voice sounds a little crusty, but I'm feeling a lot better. So if you could bear with me, this is okay. Purple Heart writes, if you need some hot takes, I have some for you. Been saving them for whenever you need some more. Thank you. 1. The fandom has ruined Andrew for me. Don't get me wrong, Andrew is one of my favorite characters in all of Fnaf, but he gets so much hatred from the fandom because he makes lore more complicated. I mean, it's always been that complicated, even before Andrew existed. Another thing is that people shoehorn him into places where he doesn't belong, being like the one you shouldn't have killed in the game's continuity. Sometimes I get worried that if I say I like Andrew or I don't believe in those theories about him, I would get harassed or attacked for it. And it's really horrible to me. Plus, since we don't have a backstory for him pre-mortem, I thought I'd make one myself, even if I'm not the best at writing stories. Then you should. Yeah, the fandom has gotten a bit, in places pretty rigid. But all I can say is that, you know what? The lore doesn't always matter. If you like a character and you want to explore them differently, then guess what? You should. And there's going to be people who like it too. Characters shouldn't be constrained by rules set by a fandom, even when it is canon, really. I mean, think about it. Think about every headcanon you have about Michael Afton. Technically, none of them is canon. So why not have them? Who says Andrew has to be something he wasn't even confirmed to be? You do you, old sport. 2. Eleanor should not have involvement in the new kid. She already had unnecessary involvement in the other stories. She didn't need to come back and make me upset that she did. Plus, I believe that Kelsey is a projection or some creation from Andrew. Yeah, I agree. Of all the stories where Eleanor probably could seamlessly be suggested as the villain, the new kid doesn't feel like a good one. Like, was she Golden Freddy? Was she invisible? Hanging out around Golden Freddy? Hanging out in Golden Freddy? Now you're gonna tell me that she was the Chica that took Susie away and coming home. Actually, they probably could have said that. 3. Scott should legit give Cassidy more development. And if she is the one we should have... killed. And if she is the one you shouldn't have killed, then they should have used female pronouns and not caused confusion on the identity of them. Oh yeah, if Cassidy's going to be name dropped so consistently, we have got to figure out at least a little more about her. And if she is supposed to be the one you shouldn't have killed, then yeah, that gender would have been a good way to nod to it. Though, funny enough, I actually considered this once, and I don't think this is canon, but technically Cassidy is a gender-neutral name. But I digress. 4. If Jake's dad and Margie met Andrew, it would absolutely not go well, because of what Andrew is like and what he's done, and Margie not being mentally okay at the end of the real Jake. I feel like the two would hate and or try to get rid of Andrew because they think he's hurting Jake or stopping Jake from being free. I could go on about this, but that's all I'm saying here. Love the hot take videos, by the way. Thank you. But honestly, I don't think so. So you have to keep in mind that the way Jake sees Andrew isn't necessarily that Andrew is trapping him. He thinks we are trapped. I want to help Andrew. And if he spoke to Jake or Margie, then that would be the wording he would use. But that aside, Evan and Margie are parents. Margie is a caretaker, but she pretty much is a parent to Jake. Not all parents are good ones, but they are. They are loving and supportive, and I have no doubts that the second they heard angry kid attacking people because he was murdered, they would probably see it for what it truly is. A tragedy. An angry child attacking people because he was murdered. Andrew is a victim. He was a child who was killed by a monster who is now trapped. Yes, he is lashing out, and he's led to people getting hurt. But to blame him for trapping Jake, I don't see that happening. I think Evan would recognize them both as victims to William, who's there too, if you recall. Even only there for a while, Jake was able to clock something else lingering in there. And as for Margie, she was severely grieving. She loved and lost both Jake and Evan. However, in this situation, I feel like Margie would sort of not recover, but if your family member died and then you got concrete confirmation that their souls are still alive, there is an afterlife, and that you'll likely see them again someday, that would change your perspective. She might be worried and frustrated about Andrew out of her love of Jake, but there's no separating the fact that he was a child murdered by William Afton. TLDR, make no mistake, this is all on Will. Everything he has a hand in, businesses, animatronics, even his own kids, he corrupts them for the worst. John O'Shea writes, hot take, well, sort of hot take. Originally, when I saw The Secret of the Mimic game, I thought it would be about Fall Fest and the enemy mascots would be these Funko action figures, and that Jackie would be like Sun and Moon. But then I heard it was being in a toy factory with Jackie looking like that, and I hated it. I thought it was a stupid decision, but I warmed up to it with the PAX West demo. Anyway, it will be my dream to be in your video, if you wanna, since you're my favorite YouTuber, and if I somehow got in here, hi YouTube. That's all for me, thank you, John. Hey John, thank you for giving me your hot take. And I've been in the same experience, with some animatronics too, where I've been sort of iffy on first appearance, but then warmed up after seeing more. Like, I wasn't too into Secret of the Mimic's initial Jackie reveal, assuming that is Jackie, of course. But seeing her final design, I'm definitely becoming a fan. And I can't wait to see her in action because that's the sort of thing that can change you from that moon guy's kinda weird to that moon guy's going in the favorites list. BVD writes, my chance of getting into a hot take video. I feel like this will be one of your least favorites, but I really don't like the puppet as a character. At least not how he was handled. He felt pretty annoying as a gameplay mechanic with him trivializing the entire camera system's existence, and in the story I think he kinda breaks it. Like he was the one who put the kids in the animatronics. Why? So they could suffer? And he, well, she, claims to be the only aware one yet doesn't do anything in the entire series except killing a random security guard player in Fnaf 2. Just existing in Fnaf 3 and being my favorite early game party member in Fnaf World. And then, when they justified his existence, they wrote him out of the story. It's so frustrating. I mainly talk about pre-Help Wanted Fnaf, but I really wish to see the puppet come back as a character again. But like, as a soul that is trying to help the others while being helpless themselves, instead of just saying she is aware but not actually doing anything. Or something of the sorts. I'm sorry if I used the wrong pronouns for him, her. I know the soul is a she, but I've been using him for puppet for far too long now. No worries. Technically, the puppet is a he in Ultimate Custom Night, but is often called a she because of the soul of Charlie. So the way I see it, technically you can call them either or, and you're not wrong either way. But yeah, that aside, I slightly disagree with part of this. Specifically that the puppet doesn't do anything. Because that's pretty on brand. Like, nobody does anything in the series for large swaths of time. Michael Afton assumedly just goes along with the flow. Henry disappears for years. The only one who we know for sure is doing stuff is Afton himself. He's a hard worker. But I certainly agree that building up on the puppet and then just sort of dropping a heavy lore dump and then immediately writing them out was probably a poor choice. The thing about stories is that after the big reveal, the story really should go on to capitalize on that reveal. Why we should care, what it means, especially when there wasn't much time for build-up. Mouthwashing jumps around in time, but Mouthwashing has some great storytelling, and there's a big twist that we get, and right after we get the big twist, we still get time with our remaining characters to go over it. But instead, it sort of felt like the puppet reveal was a way to get rid of them quickly. And for the most part, it worked, since there's like a semi-common consensus that the puppet shouldn't come back. Because Charlie deserves to sleep. Ironic, since in the fourth closet, Charlie died and then didn't sleep. That broad was up and walking even after her skewering. And don't get me started on the double standard of the puppet not being able to come back, but the entire Afton family supposedly being reborn as various characters. What makes them so special? Everything else about the puppet, about their character motives and stuff like that, I understand it. And I agree. But also, I kind of think that it's all sort of a result of early FNAF not having much, like, direct character focus. Feathers McGraw writes, kinda unrelated, but let me copy-paste this because you said about making a new hot take vid. My hot takes are, 1. I think the lore sucks not because it's complicated, but because there is no real story because most characters in the games have no personality, example being how Mike, the main character of the original saga, is just a name slapped on the player, or how the games want me to think Golden Freddy is a big important deal, while gatekeeping any and all info about him for the mystery, or how Lefty just sits in a corner in FNAF 6 and does nothing, despite supposedly being important. They even sat out of their own funeral. The week before, a little choose-your-own-adventure book gives the main band more characterization in like maybe 200 pages than the games did in the entire decade, which should make my issues obvious. I'm not going to attempt solving a story if I don't care for the personality-lacking characters. And that's a good point. All I can say is that VIP, the CYOA, did something no other FNAF game or book could. It actually gave us a darn good Monty. So those books are pretty impressive. 2. I think FNAF 4 being the crying child's dream was better than the Nightmare gas thingy, and I love the idea that Nightmare was the fading memory of Fredbear becoming a dark silhouette as the kid nears the end of his coma, which now doesn't work with FNAF 4 being just William's mad scientist nonsense. I think that's a matter of opinion. And in my opinion, yes, I kind of prefer the nightmares being the crying child's distorted memories of the bite being played back by a broken mind. I've always been really into that. I know that like the illusion discs and the gas are such a big deal to the lore, but I feel like it's so effective and would make FNAF 4 being so self-contained much more worthwhile. 3. I don't know how hot this is, but I think movie William is the best version of William, and Dave in the Silver Eyes was the only other one I liked anyway. I don't think that's hot at all. People really seem to like movie Afton, and I think that the movie pulled off the fake identity thing perfectly. I've probably said this before, I think that the Silver Eyes does William Afton way better than the Twisted Ones in the fourth closet. But, compared to movie Afton, so, Dave, you know immediately he's sus. You know something's up with him. But Steve is someone you know. Steve fits into society and disappears without a trace. That doesn't mean that Dave from the Silver Eyes is bad. That's just saying that Steve was very good. 4. I think Freddy was an amazing threat for being the most threatening leader of the band. It's a big shame that by the second game he became just another basic animatronic you need to fend off rather than the big threat, and not even getting a Toreador March scene in the movie, and I think the week before was the only entry after FNAF 1 to make Freddy from Five Nights at Freddy's the biggest threat again. Full disclosure, I have not read the week before yet, but I can say that, yeah, I agree. I would go out on a limb and say that I don't think I ever saw Freddy as the big bad. Like, sure, he came in later in FNAF 1. He was the headliner. But you had Foxy with his own special mechanics, and Golden Freddy being the lore magnet. By design of having two animatronics flanking him, Freddy sort of had trouble standing out, even from the beginning. Caleb writes, this is most likely going to be my last attempt to get in on hot takes. Number 1. How did Glamrock Chica know Gregory's name in the main security breach game? She is the only enemy animatronic to say Gregory's name. Was she supposed to be the Guardian and they switched it to Freddy? Actually, Glamrock Chica probably knew Gregory's name because in an unreleased voice line, Vanessa called on the Glamrocks to chase him. And knowing something happened between her and Gregory before security breach that we're not privy to, that's probably what's up. You wouldn't think those cut voice lines would matter, but then, Gregory brings up the missing children and yeah, there's still remnants of them lingering around. 2. Cassie has a reason to become a villain. Gregory doesn't. I agree. I think Cassie has a really solid reason to become a villain. Her father, who, as of right now, is the only parent we know of in her life, was consumed by the Fazbear Entertainment conglomerate. She was lured down into a basement by some homicidal mimicking robot that apparently Fazbear Entertainment has never made any effort to, do anything about. They left all of her favorite robots to rot and decay. Yeah, pretty much she has every reason to become a villain. 3. Why do people think that it's okay to attack a ship like we are in the Steven Universe fandom? Because that's how fandoms are. It used to be bad in the Sonic fandom too, but before anyone says anything about shipping kids, no, we're not talking about shipping ghost children. In fact, this comment is probably talking about the Glamrock Freddy x Glamrock Bonnie discourse that shook the community. Everyone was really shipping him with Monty, and it was a big disappointment for them. 4. I think that security breach was extremely rushed. We should have stayed 5 nights in the Pizzaplex, maybe even get to see the animatronics for longer, but we got what we got. Well, yeah, yup, true. 5. Fnaf 4 is the hardest Fnaf game. Yeah, for me it is, because I have that weird hearing and I hear noises and can't differentiate them right. So the subtle noises you're supposed to hear, I cannot hear them. But it does make the game incredibly frustrating. 6. P.S. I think that if all the animatronics were to team up for a fight, Sun and BB would be the most unhinged team. Yes, they would. You've got the bedtime clown and the immortal one. Who's gonna stop them? The number 1 best creature to be writes, I wouldn't call it a hot take, but I have a complaint. I think newer depictions ruin Candy Cadet. Candy Cadet is my favorite, just a perfect little ray of sunshine. I loved back in his introduction when all we had was this cryptic, benevolent storyteller who mysteriously knew everything and only shared little pieces for fun. That could have been an incredible dynamic. I mean, really, there could be so much added to the Cadet with him knowing everything and being all cryptic and stuff. But all we got was an exposition machine with no explanation. They killed my son. Yeah, true, I can see what you mean. A character who is just a fun aside has been more recently used kind of just for the current lore instead of Pizzeria Simulator, where even though he said lore, there was a more investigative approach. I think what I'm looking to say, I'm sorry this is so messy, Candy Cadet has become too serious. Because he's technically doing the same thing, but the whole vibe kinda changed. Salmana Shadi writes, I will get into a hot takes video, and here's mine. Why the hell do we have more information about Susie than practically every damn main character in the franchise? Not even just the Aftons and the Emilys, but the other kids in general. Just look at the amount of stuff she gets compared to the others. Cassidy only gets a few sprinkles here and there. Gabriel returned, only implied, and You're the Band. A scrapped story, mind you, and Fritz was only ever revealed in the 4th closet. After that, we never see him again. The kid possesses Foxy. Scott, are you sure you don't want to add anything? And oh ho, that was a bad laugh. And oh ho, don't even get me started on the missing children incident, Jeremy. He gets no attention, no details, and guess what? He doesn't even get an appearance. The movie doesn't count. There are many differences. And people thought the Gregory, Cassie, Monty double standard was bad. Try the Susie missing children incident Jeremy double standard instead. I think I talked about this before, but it really is weird that we have all this information on Susie. We have more information on Susie than Cassidy, Game Charlie, the other kids, and Michael Afton. And she's just Chica. That's a thinker. My only guess could be that because Susie got a moment of screen time, she's now the one missing child that can be brought up without revealing extra about the lore because they're very tight-lipped on that. But since we already know Susie, they can talk about Susie sort of freely, and there's no stepping on toes. But it's still very odd. Ace Archer writes, I said it in your last Hot Takes video. Great job, by the way. Thank you. But Vanny is overhated and underused. And I do think there is use for her. If Glitch Trap was erased, she's still damaged. No one walks away from something like that and just becomes normal. Under the influence, she's learned how to hide in plain sight, hack, and kill. Things that would make her a different killer than Afton. I keep seeing the Crane game ending as not as Glitch Trap's final installment, but rather Vanny saying, I don't need you. She views him as a toy as well as the player. It could have been Vanessa looking at you, and it'd still be eerie and confusing, but the devs chose Vanny. I'm not convinced she's not going to return. That, and in a meta sense, she still has official merch. You don't continue to sell merchandise of a character you don't intend to use and isn't popular in the fan base. Not sure if this is where I post hot takes, but I figured I might as well join the fun in this post. Well, you found the right place. This is the part where I'm extra petty and point out that they did make a bunch of merch for a character they didn't use. Okay, but I'm just joking. Truthfully, yes, I think it would be weird if Vanny didn't return with how much interest there is in her. I simply think that, well, we're currently working past her prime, for one, and for two, I'm not entirely confident that Vanny won't get cut again. We're at 4 now. Even in Help 1 and 2, Vanny's role was trimmed back, and that's noticeable. Because if this is the case when Vanny's finally freed from Glitch Trap to do her own thing, then she did it in the same game that her role was pulled back for his. Long story short, Vanny has got to stop skipping out on set while the games are being made. Craze Mix writes, I have many hot takes and I hope I made them clear and ask questions if you have any. Number 1. Molten MCI in my opinion is bad. I just don't like the idea that all of William's original victims possessing practically all the animatronics and never got to rest. I find it really lazy too if the theory is canon, because instead of like Funtime Foxy or Toy Freddy having their own spirits with personality and motivations, it's just, oh, all of Afton's victims, again for the 10th time. Like Afton, his original victims need to stay dead. I'm personally not a big fan of the Molten MCI, both because it's not set up well, that is, it wasn't established in the games that it happened, as after William smashed the animatronics he became Springtrap, so he would have had to come out of the wall and then built the Fun Times. But more so, how it affects the Fun Times. They were murderous machines built to kidnap and kill, dangerous, brutal. But with the Molten MCI, that's implying that they too have dead children's spirits in them, so now they have to be victims. They can't just be killer robots. Now I gotta sympathize with them. 2. People who hate William for crimes he was never confirmed to do are bad people. I remember seeing a post that I can't remember who or what platform it's on, but the person made William, you can hate a character, just don't give them crimes they didn't do in canon. So this is complicated, and I'll explain why. Technically, you're not a bad person for disliking a character. But if you dislike a character for something that they didn't do, you're just, I guess, factually wrong. Like, if you hate Michael Afton because he used to punt cats down the alleyway behind Freddy's, like, yes, that's a horrible thing. But canonically, Michael didn't do that. 3. Fan projects like comics get too much hate if it doesn't line up with a popular theory and it's stupid. True. Canon is canon, but in fan works, that shouldn't have to be. The point of fan works is usually to explore parts of a work that canon doesn't cover. Like, what if there were no murders? What if the animatronics were anthropomorphic? What if Michael Afton did take Ennard home with him? There's a whole world out there of possibilities. 4. You are the best FNAF YouTuber, and people can fight me on this one. Thank you. I try my best. I'm not the best, but it's really nice. I really do appreciate hearing it, so thank you. 5. Henry is a bad person and looks like they gave a homeless man a suit. Henry looks like a minion, and I will never unsee it. And he's also a pretty flawed individual, with the worst thing he ever did being growing that mullet. 6. Sammy should have been the 4th closet antagonist instead of Baby. Yeah, that would definitely be cool depending on what Sammy showed up as. I'm assuming as an animatronic, that would have been really intense. 7. Sexy Baby should not exist. Yes. 8. Monty didn't kill Bonnie. I just feel like it's a big red herring. Maybe, but I personally think he did. But I can't say for sure why. Could have been out of jealousy, could have been out of possession, in which case it technically wouldn't have been him if it was him being possessed. But I digress. 9. Harassing over theorizing is garbage. Absolutely. There's a big difference between debating over theories, which is fine, to actually beginning to harass folks. At the end of the day, it's just a story, they're just theories. 10. Harassing over liking Monty is stupid. I'm a Monty fan, but I can tell he practically has no character. Yeah, that is especially tacky considering that some of the most beloved FNAF characters don't have much personality at all. Sorry if this is bad, I just wanted to get my thoughts out. Nope, wasn't bad at all, it was great. Domino's best, right? My hot take is gonna sting bad for me. FNAF World, just as a concept, is not a bad game. Its initial hate given the disappointing aftermath of FNAF 4's hype is understandable, as people were expecting a game like Sister Location to come around to answer the questions left. As it stands now, FNAF World is one of the more beloved FNAF games nowadays, and it is one of my favorites. But that's not the hot take. Despite FNAF World being one of my personal favorites, it just isn't a well put together game, let alone a balanced RPG. The characters all feel samey and not too distinct. The progression from weaker to stronger characters and the consistency in which you'll swap characters out makes leveling up any given team pointless. There's absolutely no balancing when it comes to how early certain chips, red chips specifically, can be obtained, and the overall design of the game is way too short. Update 1 content at least, to function as a good RPG when compared to similar games. When it comes to all other aspects, I think it varies. The story is entirely reliant on the meta-narrative for both updates, the minigames can be pretty fun, and the OST slaps. All this to say that, even though it's flawed, I still do enjoy going back to FNAF World at least for a bit. I agree, both to going back to it and the fact that it is flawed. And what adds to that fact is that the FNAF World of today is a result of many quality of life updates. Keep in mind, when it released, there weren't even numbers for the damage, and unless I'm remembering this wrong, I thought it actually cost money before it went free to play. So there's one mystery solved on why the consensus spun around. But yeah, I played FNAF World recently for footage, and probably the biggest disappointment is just how light the RPG elements are. And it being for kids isn't really an excuse because there are dozens of RPGs for kids that are still able to be a little more advanced. It was just not the genre shift FNAF was prepared for. And that doesn't mean it's a bad game, but it does have issues, and if we do eventually get a Fnaf world continuation, those kinks will need to be ironed out. Anonymous writes, hot take, I personally appreciate whenever the formula for the animatronic bands being variants of the originals is mixed up. I love the classics as much as anyone else, but for me at least, some of the most memorable bands in the series include the Fun Times and the Glamrocks. Part of the reason being the original characters. In the case of the Fun Times, Baby may have been a little botched, but at least she got to shine as a somewhat complex character in Sister Location. And Ballora is genuinely creepy with an amazing music box. In the case of the Glamrocks, I wish they did more with Monty, but as of Help Wanted 2 and Ruin, Roxy has become a pretty well-rounded character. But even then, the amount of fan art I've seen with people filling the Fun Times and Glamrocks completely with variants is astronomical. I love Chica and Foxy, but they've already gotten plenty of attention, and I could have gone without ever seeing a Fun Time Chica variant or a Glamrock Foxy variant. Sorry for the rant, I just have a lot of thoughts. Love your content, by the way. Thank you. I definitely get that, and honestly, I really agree. There's only so many Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxies that you can get without them becoming predictable, especially since in a few cases, when the band's all together, they end up not standing out. Once it's mandatory to have a Chica, Bonnie, Foxy in every band, that's when the series' creativity will really get stifled, because really, Roxy and Monty were a breath of fresh air. And I have to say, the band that really makes me feel like this is the correct way to go about it, switching out band members, was not the Funtime band, it was the Rockstars. Now, I know the Rockstars weren't very utilized, but they were so underutilized, and so, this is going to be my hot take of the video, but I don't necessarily like Rockstar Bonnie and Rockstar Chica. Like, I like their personalities, but design-wise, I think they're a little bland. And I think the Rockstar band was really the point when I was like, gee, if we're just gonna keep getting the same 4 members in a new variation every game, that's going to get dull. But then right afterwards, things got shook up, so that's it. Tommy Collada writes, my hot take, staff bots killed the series, I hate them, they look dumb. Also, I hate how Fazbear Entertainment went from a company who turned the other way on safety checks or cut corners on sites or materials to a company run by domestic terrorists. Yeah, the outlandish amount of evil and incompetence Fazbear Entertainment exhibits, to the point where I question how they are still able to stay in business when they bleed so much money on useless endeavors, is definitely worth talking about. But as for the staff bots, I do like them, but I can see why people don't. And I can see how their role in Security Breach was a band-aid solution to a problem that wasn't really fixed. And now they're getting added into the distant past, as in Secret of the Mimic. So yeah, I'm not really sure how that's going to work out. Zuko Prince writes, my hot take, Pizzeria Simulator is great and you're just mad because of the puppet retcon. Now, in all seriousness, my hot take is that at this point, the franchise must just drop all the post-Help Wanted storyline as some sort of dream limbo thingy that happens with the original characters because of the inability of the Vengeful Spirit to let go of Afton, at least in my headcanon. And I'm saying this not because I don't like the new storyline, quite the opposite. After Security Breach, I was interested with what was going to happen next, that we finally have some sort of event that is actually happening in real time and in the current place of the timeline. But then Ruin with its overcorrections because of angry fans, and now we're back to this cryptic stuff, arguing about timelines, and now even the CMI is back, slightly. Help Wanted to basically confirmed for me that Steelwool doesn't know what they want the story to be, and it's just too late to figure all this out. But problem is, I really struggle to figure out how to go forward without some massive retcon, to be honest. It's just a mess, even more than usual for Fnaf, which is at least impressive. Now, I doubt the story's going to get dropped, but I've said it before and I'll say it again, the first era and the second era should have definitely been separated more. If it was, there wouldn't be as much of a concern about what's getting changed in the old lore, because the old lore would just be its own thing. And it seems like when Fnaf tries to mix both is when things get odd. Such as the situation with Vanny. In case you don't know, she was going to be in a minigame, 2 minigames, in Into the Pit, and was cut. Which is actually good, because she was going to be working alongside Afton and having rebuilt the original classics, and yeah, that would have made everything very complicated. Obviously, that's not on Steelwool, and I can't blame them for the issues out of their control, especially after the Burn Trap revelations. Note that this is an older hot take, and the Burn Trap revelation had not been out yet. Speaking of Burn Trap, Corporal Cheese writes, hot take, Scott Cawthon should just completely step away from Fnaf at this point. A lot of people say, oh, Steelwool misinterpreted what Scott wanted for Security Breach. But nobody asks, why didn't Scott make sure it was the way he wanted? Or more importantly, why did Scott decide to step back from the franchise if he's still going to half-heartedly dictate how the story goes to the point that it actively leads to confusion for the developers and an objectively more messy and incoherent story overall? I appreciate what Scott did for the franchise and his unique version of storytelling, but overall he needs to either be directly involved, which he obviously no longer wants to be, or he needs to not be involved at all, except for clarifying questions that Steelwool would have about the lore. This is a very complicated issue with a very uncomplicated answer, and you gave the answer. That answer is that if Scott wants a game to have a very specific story, he needs to tell the game creators that story exactly and have faith that they won't leak it and they'll understand it. And if he wants them to do their own thing, then he needs to unhook the leash. He can have some stipulations, but there's not much middle ground here. Scott, from what he said, handed Steelwool the reins to make Security Breach, but then treated them like curious fans asking about lore in a Q&A instead of business partners. And because of that, things did get confused, and the Burn Trap paradox was born. It wasn't Security Breach's only problem, obviously, but it didn't help development. And the thing is, to me, is that I am not sure why. Like, my only guess is that Scott was afraid of leaks, but he could have signed an NDA with Steelwool. In fact, working with a company and creating for your IP, I would anticipate some amount of an NDA. Business is business. He could have done that fine. But I think the lesson is clear. Transparency begets a better product. And I think that transparency could have been given to the fans as well, and I'm not going to ring Scott out for this. But he posted in December the year before Security Breach that the game was almost ready, but Steelwool was adding so much more and the cake needs more time to bake. But from what we know of development and the changing maps, that wasn't entirely true. Security Breach was actually nowhere near finished. It was more close to the beginning than the end. And maybe if Scott had been a little more transparent about that, guys, this is a AAA game, it's going to take longer, then some of the pressure would have been taken off. Though I say that as someone 100% convinced that Security Breach's release date was dictated by PlayStation, exclusivity, and the holidays, so wouldn't have changed that much, I suppose. Error writes, hot take, I actually love Security Breach. Yeah, sure, the lore might have been all over the place, and the gameplay might have been a giant fetch quest, and Mazer size can burn. But you know what it has got? Charm. I love that about it. People say the animatronics having voice lines and personalities is bad because it takes away from the horror, and yeah, I agree it does. But Security Breach was never going to be horror with its neon aesthetic and bright lights, so having the animatronics have personality makes the games feel a lot more fun. Also, I'm not sure if this is a hot take anymore, since multiple people have come out saying they love the game too, but anyways, it's okay if this doesn't make it in. Love your videos. Thank you. But you know what? I agree. Honestly, the complaints about friendly animatronics, when I say I have problems with Security Breach, those aren't the parts that I feel like are an issue to me. I know a lot of folks got back into the series or got into the series for the first time because of those personalities, and after all we've covered about the humans lacking personalities, say what you want about Security Breach, but it stood out. That doesn't change that Security Breach is flawed, but I can understand the charm. And yeah, the Mazer-sized puzzle was like the slide puzzle from Purgatory, and I will live happily if I never have to do it again. Actually, this brings up something that I saw in a thumbnail of a video that I didn't watch. So, video's topic might have been completely different. But it was about Indigo Park, and it was talking about how Rambley the Raccoon makes Indigo Park less scary, and how if Indigo Park didn't have Rambley, it would be a scarier game. And I'm assuming the video would have gone on to say it would have made it a better game. My argument to that would be, if Indigo Park would have not had Rambley the Raccoon, it would have not been a scarier game. It would have been another indie horror game that would have gone directly under the radar. And that's not to say that Indigo Park doesn't have stuff other than Rambley the Raccoon in it. But I am saying, when you're making a horror game, when you're making a mascot horror game, having a mascot that people can cling on to is like the first step in making that successful. And two, most importantly, if you're going to make an indie horror game and you're competing with a bunch of established franchises, you've got to have something in there that makes you stand out. And Indigo Park had Rambley the Raccoon. That doesn't have much to do with Fnaf, but... well, actually, it does have a lot to do with Fnaf, because at this current time, many of Fnaf's more recent games have really hinged off of their characters. Roxanne Wolf, Glamrock Freddy, the daycare attendant. Major characters who are drawing people in. Even the Mimic right now is a very popular character. So, that counts. Okay, moving on. Now, this next one is interesting because a few hot take videos ago, I got like a whopping 4 or so hot takes talking about FNAF fighting games. So this is a counter I wasn't expecting. Toy Freddy Gaming writes, not really a true hot take, however this thought has been stuck in my mind and I think we'll have some interesting discussion. A FNAF fighting game is one of the worst options for a spin-off and wouldn't really work out. Now don't get me wrong, on paper it's a cool idea. FNAF has a large roster of cool and unique characters people love, so it's not like you don't have options for the roster. Plus, it could be a great way to have all of the different eras of FNAF in a single game, and I can just imagine all of the what-if interactions that could be possible. There's plenty of options for stages, DLC would be a no-brainer, and there could even be some secret characters. The problem arises when you realize that most FNAF characters have very limited movement. Like, I think Freddy kind of has enough for a moveset, but besides him, you would really need to stretch for any other character. Even if you take FNAF World into consideration, it's really barren for moveset potential. I haven't really seen anyone talk about the possibility of a FNAF fighting game though, so I guess this take can't really be hot. I don't know, it's an idea that's been on my mind, and I thought it would be intriguing to share. I think you actually have a really good point. And what you'd have to do in this situation is pick and choose various FNAF characters who have fighting potential other than like every single character. Like if you choose the Ultimate Custom Night roster, a lot of those characters, especially the bulky Freddys, are going to likely play the same. So you would have to pick and choose which characters you can get to work uniquely and likely have like only a couple of characters from each game. The thing about a FNAF fighting game is that it's a big undertaking. Fighting games are. It's more than just putting sprites on a platform. There's a lot of balancing that needs to go into it, so it will be a lot of work. Mr. Saliumur writes, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, Afton's comic design sucks complete ass, and it looks like Germa. I shouldn't be looking at the rest of the company like, why the hell did you hire that dude just from his appearance alone? Why the hell did you give me that mental image? Elmaster de Zoologia writes, hot take, Balloon Boy is the GOAT. all hatred he gets is undeserved. Seriously, I've been trying to get into one of your videos for years. Well, I'm glad to have you. And I think a lot of the hatred of Balloon Boy is actually like a running joke, really. Everyone hates Balloon Boy, but also he's pretty beloved for being a gremlin, you know what I mean? Rawlsea Deltaroon writes, a little take that's a little hot. Fnaf does not need a bunch of new characters with every new installment. They should focus on fleshing out old characters instead of throwing them away and replacing them with new ones by the next game. I agree. When it comes to the human characters, I get how hard it is when we're jumping through time, but elsewise it might be beneficial to follow familiar characters for a while. Son of a Lich writes, hot take, the missing kids in Breach, Ruin distract from the central story. It's mentioned in passing as a motivator, but we're so disconnected from it that they literally mean nothing. Vanny taking over the Plex and replacing staff with robots should have been the core, and gives actual meaning behind Glitchtrap taking over Vanny, Mimic 1 or not. Oh yeah, you said it yourself. It literally meant nothing. It was just so sudden, and not clarified upon at all, and right before the game's endings. So yeah, honestly, it could have been left out. The only context it adds is, yeah, Vanny has a body count, and that Gregory would have been another casualty if he wouldn't have fought back. Real Azukir writes, I'm sad Funko lost the Fnaf license. Yes, they had their controversies here and there, and don't even get me started on the printed fabric and blacklight lines, but I genuinely liked a lot of their products. I grew up with Fnaf, and I have fond memories collecting the various merch items they released, mainly the plushies. Me too. Funko products weren't perfect, but they were good, especially for fans who can't afford $30 to $50 for a single plush. I'm fortunate enough that I can occasionally splurge on something like that, but a lot of people can't. And even them, to have them be stylized in a way you might not want. And I guess that means no more action figures, because if someone like NECA takes over, oh boy, expect them to look great, be stiff as a board, and super expensive. And I say this as someone who owns a few NECA figures. The name is self-explanatory, right? I can't remember what I said the last time you did one of these, and I don't believe it was picked. But I'll just ask, do you think that Fnaf could do or will do anything remotely as innovative or impactful in the video game horror genre as the original series of games? I definitely think the peak of the hype has died down, but I don't know if what I'm saying even means much since I just played the FNAF 3 demo on my mom's phone with the audio off once years ago. I think absolutely. See, so innovation is a funny concept because it can immediately date itself. Innovation is more than just like recreating the market. It can be reframing an old idea in a way that makes it stand out. It can be bringing in new gameplay mechanics that work. I consider Into the Pit innovating the brand because it used new and familiar mechanics for the franchise and did so in a fresh way, especially since the biggest draw of Into the Pit is its art style and methods of storytelling. At any point, FNAF can come out with a game that really knocks it out of the park, one that reinvents itself in a new way. It's just a matter of which and when. Roasted Candies writes, my hot take is that I really dislike the glam mic theory, because it's essentially just attributing Glamrock Freddy's entire character to a dead British man. I understand where it comes from, but it just leaves a bad taste in my mouth, I don't know. I can see that. Not much to say on it personally. I don't subscribe to Glam Mic, and I feel like if it was real, it would have needed to actually be much more present than it was. But that being said, I'm not necessarily against it if it did come out, as long as it was like established. Aaron Johnson writes, there's a lot of concerns I have about modern FNAF, one of the biggest issues being that the series is too focused on making theory bait. I know that the Mysteries of FNAF is the main reason the franchise has gotten as big as it is, and that a lot of people enjoy trying to piece everything together, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. But with how convoluted and open-ended everything has gotten, at this point I feel that the people working on FNAF should pull back on the mysteries a bit and focus more on telling an engaging story that doesn't require a doctorate in FNAFology to understand. Also, I prefer calling the blob Legion. Firstly, Yes, Legion would be a very cool name. Secondly, I also agree. So there's nothing wrong with some theory baiting. Like you said, the problem is how overly complicated things are, and how we don't really get answers or even clear plot points because of vagueness being used to obscure the story. But it gets to the point where it's not helping. It's not useful when you have to theorize whether characters are the same or not based off endings, or you have to guess connections between characters, or fill in giant gaps where there's no information to fill it in. At that point, you're doing yourself and your story a disservice by being so vague. So we're at the final hot take. Normally I do one of my own, but I couldn't think of a good one. Unless you consider the Rambley one. So instead, here's a longer one that I haven't seen before. Until now, there was another one with very similar hot take, but this one was more in depth, and longer. So here we go. Anonymous writes, "Oh boy, I think this take might be the hottest. My hot take is Glamrock Freddy is a tad overrated and quite mischaracterized by most of the fandom. Now before I start, I like Glamrock Freddy, I do, so don't get any wrong ideas. However, his character does have some flaws, either that be character flaws or writing flaws that in my opinion get overlooked by the fandom. First of all, Freddy is just not the best to Gregory. He's not bad, of course, he's loving and caring to Gregory, but I find that most people treat him like a does no wrong kind of character, even though he's guiding to Gregory has flaws. He put Gregory in a lot of danger across the game, and I feel like most undeserved slander Gregory gets should really be also on Freddy, or just Freddy. Gregory isn't perfect, but still. As a lot of the stuff Gregory does is because Freddy tells him. Why did the lights go off? Because Freddy told him to get a security badge. Why does security always get alerted? Because Freddy told him to get something. Why did Gregory waste time here or there and not wait out? Because Freddy told him to keep on moving. Now, this wouldn't really be an issue had Freddy learned his lesson, but with the security alerts, he doesn't. It just doesn't happen 1 or 2 times. It happens 5 times, and yet Freddy doesn't think, "Hey, every time Gregory obtains a security badge, he always gets in trouble. Maybe we should open up the badges to make sure they're booby-trapped." Or something, but he doesn't. Now, is this a bad thing? No, of course not. In fact, I love it. It makes sense Freddy was probably never programmed to parent or to take care of children for the long term. That's the daycare attendant's job. So it only makes sense he would be a flawed caregiver. It's just, to me at least, I feel like a lot of people miss that fact about his character. You might say, "Oh, well, Glamrock Freddy is just naive. He doesn't know better." Which is another mischaracterization of him. Sure, Freddy is slow at some times, but he isn't plain out stupid. He is smart and knows a lot about the Pizzaplex and how it works from front to back and the technology around it. Sure, he might not get social cues, but he does have a brain, or a CPU, I should say. Glamrock Freddy also isn't as pacifist as people make him out to be. He's not full-on violent, but he can be violent as in a protective dad. Let me explain. Gregory decommissioning the Glamrocks and obtaining their parts is by far the most hated argument surrounding that character. But much like before, I feel like people put too much of the blame onto him, but not Freddy, even though he did play a small part with that. Firstly, a lot of people are forgetting that Freddy was the one to inform Gregory and encourage him to use the Phaser Blaster and the Phascam on the Glamrocks, so he isn't below hurting his bandmates to protect Gregory. Just putting that out there. Second, even though Freddy said that he would never do anything to hurt his friends, he does give a lot of hints and nudges to Gregory to do so. When Freddy is close to the Monty gates, before he gets Monty's claws, he tells Gregory, "I could open these if I had Monty's claws." Sure, it could be him talking out loud, but his tone he says it in is more of an alluring tone, as if he's trying to encourage to get the claws. Freddy gives Gregory the hint that Chica, and I quote, "goes cuckoo for Monty mystery mix." Again, could be him talking out loud, but still, when Gregory goes to Roxy Raceway, Freddy states, "Perhaps you could find some clues on how to deal with Roxy while you are there." When you say deal with someone, it's usually equal to take care of someone, which means to finish something off. You all might be saying, he's just speaking out loud, or he doesn't mean it like that. Which to that I respond with this. When Gregory obtains the log message that tells Gregory that Monty broke his legs by falling off the catwalks via the big splash bucket, Freddy says this: "Gregory, I do not mean to be intrusive, but I read the message you found in the security office. There may be a chance to stop Monty from hunting you." Now, what on earth could he have meant by stop Monty other than to decommission him? Or at the very least weaken him, especially since he says this after reading the message that tells of Monty breaking his legs. Freddy did have some part on the shattering of his bandmates. Now, if this is true, what was up with him originally stating he would never do anything to hurt them and freaking out about the upgrade? And is this a bad thing? Once again, no, it's a great thing. It actually adds way more depth to Freddy as a character other than naive, soft dad, but paints him as someone who's conflicting with himself, whether to choose his friends who have lost themselves or trying to escape his prison. That's why at times he doesn't want to hurt his friends, but at other times gives hints on how to do so. It's self-confliction. That was finally put to the test in the Princess Quest ending, where Freddy ordered Gregory to turn the staff bots against Vanny. He says this in a very aggressive tone, showing he means business. He's telling Gregory, a child, to kill Vanessa, a human, pulling her apart limb by limb, but Gregory does the selfless thing and saves Vanessa instead. Freddy would do anything to protect his child. I forgot all about that. Yeah, it was Freddy who told Gregory to kill Vanny. That's true. Now, I should say this, however, I don't think Freddy wanted to go through this much damage, especially in Ruin. He most likely just wanted to temporarily disable them. But my point was just to show that mischaracterization of Freddy. He isn't the pacifist, soft, dumb bear most of the fandom makes. He's a new, flawed parent who's conflicted on how much he's going to do to protect his kid. Lastly, his writing. His writing isn't bad in my opinion. His relationship with Gregory is really sweet, but one thing is he doesn't really change, development-wise. Now, I know I just went crazy on saying how Freddy confronted his confliction, but if we're really totally honest, the game does a weak job at conveying that, and my take did have to leap into some stretches to come to that conclusion. I will admit that. Like Glamrock, Freddy starts as a nice, caring dad and ends as a nice, caring dad. I'm more or less talking about the cut shattered Freddy section. Glamrock Freddy was potentially meant to come after Gregory after being shattered by Vanny. This would have done wonders for not only Freddy, but also Gregory. Freddy gaining purple claws via Monty's claws, purple bow tie via Chica's voice box for some reason, and purple eyeshadow via Roxy's eyes. All of this was meant to be built up for when Freddy would have been controlled by Glitchtrap. It would also make somewhat sense those parts belonged to Freddy's friends that were being infected by Glitchtrap. Those parts would have been slowly taking over Freddy. It would have been a what have I created thing for Gregory. This is the monster he created. This is the consequences. It also would have been a good dark night of the soul moment for Gregory too, as he feels defeated, lost without his only friend. However, without the entire buildup of putting the Glamrock's parts into Freddy, him turning purple and so on was all for nothing, and without making some leaps, Freddy, contrary to popular belief, becomes an unfinished character lacking a proper conclusion. This is my hot take. Thank you for reading. So here's my hot take. You're right. Absolutely everything you just said is like 100% correct. And I say this as someone who loves Glamrock Freddy. I think he's a great character. I think he's so cool. He absolutely drops the ball on Gregory repeatedly. It wasn't just a daycare attendant. Freddy was also dropping the ball on Gregory. First of all, he blows a lot of time getting Gregory to the exit, to the point where Gregory almost got to the doors if Freddy would have just ran a little faster. Okay, honest mistake. It's fine. Freddy now decides that they're going to go around collecting these security badges. He has Gregory doing it, not himself. And because of that, and because he won't go into anywhere with Gregory, Gregory continues to be put in these situations. Meanwhile, Freddy's like, I would never hurt my friends. But by the way, we really should do something to deal with Roxy. And let's not even begin to talk about the absolutely bizarre section right after Vanny first grabs Gregory, or Vanessa takes Gregory to the Lost and Found, where Freddy is like absolutely lying and is acting very suspicious, and we never figure out what that's about. He says, I was looking for you everywhere, and then I collapsed here. He collapsed in a completely different location that just happened to be near that sinkhole. First off, then he gets up and runs to the security office to grab Gregory. He's like, oh, I guess I must have had a second wind, but I am too weak to help you any further, so you need to go up and put the security disc in. Now, I'm willing to believe, and then he passes out in the basement. I'm willing to believe Freddy might have had a burst of energy, but also the entire section was very suspicious. And the Monty thing, yes. Gregory, this says that while on the catwalks, Monty once fell off and broke his legs. I think I have an idea on how we can deal with Monty. I could really use Monty's claws. And then later he's like, where did you get these claws? Oh, somewhere? Oh, well, that's fine and dandy. Yeah, that's another thing too. Freddy's intelligence changes. At times, Freddy is very aware of what's going on and very knowledgeable, but then he has sudden moments where he suddenly becomes exceptionally dumb, and they just happen to also coincide with things that he needs to turn his head away from. But nothing changes the Vanny thing. That's true. Freddy did tell Gregory to disassemble Vanny. He told him that knowing exactly what would happen because it had just happened to him. He knew what was going to happen. And yes, he did that to protect Gregory, but I think that goes to show that Freddy does have some claws. You lay a good point. I am commandeering your hot take. I'm using it as my own now as well. But anyway, that's all for now. Let's end it there. Thank you for watching.